Blaise Pascal, a French mathematician, physicist, inventor, philosopher, writer, and a theologian who lived during 1600s, once said, "Can anything be stupider than that a man has the right to kill me because he lives on the other side of the river, and his ruler has a quarrel with mine, though I have not quarreled with him?" I think that's reflective of the situation that we see unfold today in the Ukraine. And sadly, people continue doing that for centuries. It is Saturday, February 26, 2022, and today we are going to take a look at what is going on in Ukraine, and Brother Stan has joined me to discuss what is left of the Freedom Convoy. Welcome to Life Ring, a podcast where we strive to provide you with a well-rounded review of what is going on in the world between Monday and Friday of this past week. My name is Alex, and joining me today is my friend and fellow citizen of Mount Vernon, Washington, Mr. Stan Davidyuk. Hello, Stan, and thank you for joining me this morning. Glad to have you as a guest host today.
Hello, Alex. Yeah, nice to be here. Quite the introduction there.
How have you been, man? I know we've had you as a guest host a while back at this point. What's the update?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Got a steady job, getting married.
Yes, you are.
And
you got a steady job as what? As an engineer of some sort, like you've been going for?
Yeah. So I work at Crane Aerospace, and they make pretty much electrical components and systems for airplanes, like the power systems, sensing systems, for all the doors, landing gear, and things like that. Wow. And new innovative technologies, because a big thing that's coming to the market right now, or that, a lot of companies are trying to go for, is actually electric airplanes. So that's a thing now.
Wow.
Yeah. So I know we're working with a company that's here in not Mount Vernon, in Washington, in Marysville, Aviation, and they have the plane built, and they've already busted down the runway, and they're getting ready to do their first flight. I know it's supposed to happen sometime now. I don't know if there's some kind of delays. I haven't really looked up on it recently, but yeah, it's interesting where technology is moving.
That's right. I do remember reading an article on the idea of a fully electric fleet, but it just seemed like it was far away. But that's cool to hear that it's here, and hey, you get to work in the field. That's exciting.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool, and it's nice. I get to work remote too. So
you do.
That's been long.
Goodness.
I mean, not fully remote, but I work like a hybrid, like 2 days.
That is
from home.
so awesome.
Yeah,
that's great, dude. Gen Z is in a sense has been hit by COVID, but then at the same time, you guys are lucky because you get to walk into a remote work economy. Like for you, that's pretty much standard at this point.
It's a huge plus. Yeah, I got used to school from home, and I started driving every single day to the job during my internship. I didn't really have an option for remote work, and I mean, it was fine. But once you experience that remote work, and this week was nice too. I mean, it snowed, so I was snowed in Monday and Tuesday. So I went into the office on Wednesday, and now I don't know. I'm tempted to find a job where I get to work full time remote.
Man, good times, man. Good times. All right. Well, if you're new to this podcast, we have 2 featured stories that we choose to highlight at any given week. One I get to share in the beginning, and the second one is shared by my co-host, Stan, in this case, at the end of the podcast. In the middle of the episode, we have a section we call Lightning Round, where we go through a dozen of stories of current events that stood out in the news this past week and offer a brief commentary. And so let's begin with our first one. Wow, what a turn of events it has been. I think that's the reaction that most people have today in the world. Because it's one thing for Russia to continue its diplomatic rhetoric and, the geopolitical chess moves with getting troops close, too close for comfort near the Ukrainian border. It's another thing to launch a full-on invasion while at the same time calling it military operation, right? And I don't even know where to begin. Most of you guys who are listening, and I bet you, Stan, and everybody I talk to are aware of one thing or another in regards to what's going on in Ukraine. So I don't think we're going to be highlighting anything new today that you haven't heard, but we are going to touch upon a few things. And I guess the goal today is to just sort of chat about the impact that it has personally on us. Again, we're far removed. We're in the safety of, another country that became our second home. But at the same time, the implications of this war will reach the world at large. And so we're going to be feeling the effects of it. Today, people, relatives, friends of ours are in Ukraine, and they kind of get the brunt of the whole conflict. And so I guess what I want to begin is, Stan, did you think a few days ago that we would be seeing this? Like, did this invasion surprise you? Like, did you think it's going to actually happen?
It's been brewing for so long. I remember I was back, I think it was in high school when the first invasion kind of started with like Crimea. And I remember it was specifically in my English class. We were at that time reading a book. It was called Animal Farm. And it was kind of a sample of the Soviet Union and kind of all the events that happened there, but in the form of a farm. And so like, it was like these pigs who were the leaders and the way they took over the house, the owner's house, and kind of led all the animals. And it was a super interesting book. But I still remember that was back in high school, 8 years ago or whatever. And it just seemed like it would just keep dragging on forever, just a little bit at a time, that there would be these tensions. But, to see a full-on invasion, it was a little bit surprising. I remember we were here sitting after youth, and Daniel brought it up, and I guess he looked up on his phone, got some kind of notification about it, and he was like, "Oh, Russia just attacked. Just officially declared that they're invading," and it was pretty surprising.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely not expected.
And considering that both Putin and Zelensky were saying that this is not going to happen. Well, I guess Biden was sort of pushing for like, this is going to happen. This is imminent. Like it's unfolding right now. Like they're getting ready to attack and all of that. And Zelensky and both Putin were like, this is like, we know what we're doing. We're sort of just sending a political message. And then all of a sudden it drops. It was unexpected. So from your perspective, because I got my notes here, but like, what have you heard so far what the situation is, if you were to summarize from what you've come across?
I mean, mostly what I've come across is just the things that, we see posted on social media of, the different attacks. There's videos and, fighter jets and tanks rolling down the street. Personally, we have family, and I know a close relative of ours was saying how his uncles lives closer to that area, and they're, have no contact with them because they're supposedly down somewhere in a subway station or whatever it is, and bomb barricades and stuff like that. So it's just crazy to hear, there's like people we know.
And I was going to say, so my biological father actually lives in Konotop, Sumskaya region, which is, that would be northeast of Ukraine. So Donbass and Lugansk, the two areas that are, that have been contested, I guess, and the fighting has been going on for the past, half a decade, is sort of east, like central east and southeast. But I came from a region from northeast, and that was also the entrance point for some of the Russian troops. So people were saying that they've seen tanks rolling through the streets of Konotop, and one person was retelling the story that they turned around and like randomly just shot at a 5-story building. I don't know if it was random or not, but they did. And they just rolled on towards Kyiv. And so then later we heard the news that the city was, number one, taken over by Russians, but then the Konotop people fought back and apparently now have control over that. And actually, if you look at the map of, what's being controlled by Russia today, I think there's like a region where it's around Konotop area where it's just this dot that's like unaffected by surrounding troops, if that makes sense. For you personally, though, you grew up here, right, in America?
Yeah.
Were you born here?
I was born here, yeah.
I think I asked you that before. Yeah, so for you, I mean, it's like, for you, it's a place where your parents came from and maybe a few relatives. But for me, I found myself being deeply touched by this more than I thought I would be. One is the brutal losses on each side, completely needless. Right? Like,
yep.
They're fighting essentially for just somebody's ambitions. Number two, and I don't know if you've been to Ukraine before?
I've been 3 times already, so.
Dang. So you weren't born there, but you've been there way more than I have. Not when I was a teen. So historical, for example, I'm looking at like the vastness of this land, and I'm like, man, if it's going to get destroyed, that's going to be sad. Number 3 is probably the whole barbaric natures coming out on both sides. So we've seen videos. Of course, Russia tries to dial it down, but we've seen videos of people just getting ugly on both sides. And then we fought like Nazis together, Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, all the Slavics side by side. And now we're seeing something similar happen. Anyways, so the biggest question that people have is, well, why won't U.S. send its troops? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I heard Putin's whole thing about, don't interfere because I have quite the nuclear arsenal behind me. So I don't know if that's, I'm sure it's a factor. I mean, that's a whole different level of just mass destruction, Yep. So to a point, they do have to play it safe and they have to be careful with what they do. But they definitely shouldn't just sit back and see how it plays out either.
Right, but like they are delaying their involvement, and maybe they're just hoping, I don't know, it dissipates or something. But you're right, the nuclear, what is this, assured destruction is probably holding people back. The whole invasion, I mean, the Ukrainian spirit, let's talk about that for a bit. No matter how people are dissatisfied with the government, nobody really just wants somebody to storm into their country, upend their livelihoods and be like, here, we're freeing you from your oppressive government and establishing a new government. And, oh, by the way, we're much better than the previous one because we totally didn't just come in by force, right? Knowing Ukrainians, what do you, like, how do you see this war unfold?
Knowing Ukrainians and coming, both my parents are Ukrainian, and seeing how, a lot of people who are more fresh coming from Ukraine here to the United States and interacting, they're really patriotic. Ukraine's a pretty small country, and not everyone could probably be like, oh, I know Ukrainian. Mm-hmm. But I think people right now are realizing this and seeing that kind of characteristic trait of Ukraine. And, I've seen a lot of posts on social media of people being fairly impressed, looking up to that. So in terms of that, looking at Snake Island, which I think you're going to talk about later, these are people who are willing to sacrifice everything they have to for their land and for their country, which is, it's pretty crazy to see.
And you give them a common enemy, which Putin has just done. They don't care what they're fighting for. They kind of know that they're like, we're fighting for our land. They're not fighting for Zelensky to keep the people in power. They're like, we just got guns, man. We just got like handed out AK-47s for free in the streets. Anybody who has a license and doesn't, it didn't matter to them. They were just handing them out. And in fact, they ran out of apparently giving out guns at this point. But yeah, they're going to fight till the last drop of blood because you entered into their homeland. And they don't really need a great cause at this point. They don't need to fight for their government. They will fight for their chunk of land. There was this one video of a lady yelling at a Russian soldier and trying to put some seeds in his pocket, sunflower seeds. It was an article.
I think I've heard of this. Yeah. She says something about putting sunflower seeds in his pocket, so when he dies, the flowers will grow. So, yeah. But I didn't realize that she was saying that to a Russian soldier. I thought it was to a Ukrainian one.
And she was an older lady, and so like I'm saying, that's kind of the scary side that comes out of people. People are really getting mad. By mad, I mean like almost crazy, right? Because they're going to be defending. Mm-hmm. And same thing would have happened here if, Lord forbid, there would be an invasion. Snake Island. As I was watching today, apparently there's been news circulating. So I think Snake Island has been a popular story. But apparently there's a possibility that they actually didn't die. This is already coming, not from the conspiracy, because conspiracy started to circulate early on that, these are like, that's a fake story, at least from the Russian side. But then there came out a video of like the soldiers actually being captured. Eventually, the Ukrainian military posted a message of saying 82 soldiers were captured from the island. Again, that doesn't mean that the 13 weren't killed, but they're still investigating it, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was something I was going to mention earlier, and I wasn't sure if I should, but I've just, I don't know of the things I've seen, but I've definitely heard a lot of people talking about like what is the kind of credibility of all the videos and things that we see. There's a lot of on purpose kind of fake inserting of information, but I think a lot of times people are just misinformed and then they start spreading it and it kind of goes out from there. So say back in the day when it was, everything was just news and media, then might have been more factually checked. But even then, I know there's plenty of examples of that not being the case, where
they would sort of tailor it to the narrative.
We got to kind of be careful.
So what I've enjoyed doing, and again, not that it gives me a fuller picture, but it does provide a better perspective. For any major events, I pull up multiple channels on screen. Yesterday I had running, I think, eight channels. You kind of just pick and choose what you watch. You can't, pay attention to all of them and just keep an eye on it. And I've got my Russian channels and then Ukrainian channels and then, your conservative and liberal channels in US. It really shows you that there is a disconnect between them all. And Russia, of course, is doing a whole different line of reasoning and thinking as to what's going on and the kind of shots they want to show versus Ukraine and versus America too. And then people are doing even their own thing on Telegrams and Vibers. And
I know most people nowadays have like the really big family chats on Viber. And then, when I see like a big text posted and it's like from the president of Ukraine or something, I'm like, I don't know.
Straight to your family.
Putting in emojis and saying to send this to everyone, then
yep.
That might be a little bit questionable. But those of us who are kind of raised here and more of in the technological area, we're a lot more skeptical of a lot of things that we see. And, as to maybe our parents and aunts and uncles might be more prone to just accept it as truth.
And also as a generation, especially yours, I'm more analytical person, so I'll go and fact check things. But especially your generation tends not to trust as quickly the information that you get, just because you've been trained to hear, the double thing. They say one thing and then later you hear another. I'll tell you a quick story. Yesterday there was a video, or maybe a day before, there was a video of people singing in subway. It was a beautiful video, great singing, that they're sheltering and singing. Well, and I was like, really? And just the way it was posted on Instagram, I think it was by Benny Johnson. So I was like, all right, I'm going to fact check this. And by the way, this is a tip for all of you out there. If you want to fact check things, this is one way to do it. You take a screenshot of, the beginning frame of the video, and then you go into Google Images and you go search by image. You upload the image and you're able to get to pretty much where it was indexed first. In a lot of cases, you'll get to the original video. I mean, if you dig enough. In my case, I was lucky it was on the first page. I was able to, maybe result number 10. And it was the original video, which was from February 20th, which means it's like 4 days before the actual invasion, right? Mm-hmm. And and it was posted by some American who was like passing in a subway. And of course, the church was still in a subway. They were still singing a song as a prayer for Ukraine because the tensions were rising. But that wasn't the invasion. They weren't sheltering, right?
Because I saw that video, I was like, oh dang, that's cool. And I saw a lot of people that reposted it, but now knowing that kind of changes everything,
Yep, it's just you got to pay attention to what's going on. And I feel like with Ukraine right now, I've said it on the podcast when we talked about Ukraine, that whoever says they know for sure what's going to happen probably doesn't have an idea. So people have been crossing into Poland. Now, Ukraine put a restriction on man leaving the country, so anybody 18 and up to 60s, I think, or 65, is not allowed to leave the country. The way they figured out how to cross the border is basically a father crosses with kids, I heard yesterday at my in-laws' house, and then the mother crosses. Because they wouldn't let kids cross the border by themselves, so they split up, father crosses with the kids, and then later a mother comes across the border. Now, at some point, I think they're going to put the two and two together and be like, hold on, same last name, you guys couldn't have crossed at the same time. Yeah. But there is a way to apparently get out. And that's another layer. Like, imagine leaving, like yesterday you had to go to work. Today you're crossing the border into another country. Yeah. And you don't know when it's going to be over. And you don't know what's going to be in your house when you return. That's a lot of things to think about. So today, instead of doing a conclusion, I would like to invite you all who are listening at any given point, even if you're listening, much later. Ukraine needs our prayers, and so wherever you are listening to this, if you're able to join us in prayer. Father, I pray for peace over Ukrainian skies. I pray for the people of Ukraine, not to trust in their own strength, but especially during these unprecedented times, to turn to you for their protection and strength. And we pray that you would give wisdom to the soldiers on both sides, not to wage a war on behalf of world leaders. We pray that the fighting would cease, that peace and borders would be restored. We pray for the families that are affected, for the innocent, for the children, that they may be spared. We pray for the world leaders, that they would have no peace within themselves until they seize the brutal overreach of power. And ultimately, we pray that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In Jesus' name, amen. Welcome to Lightning Round, where we take a look at the other stories that happened throughout the week that weren't about Ukraine or truckers. And we offer a brief commentary. And the first one is in the world of world news. And this one comes from BBC, that the Queen tested positive for COVID. Now, Stan, are you immune to Omicron at this point? Do you know? Do you think?
I would assume so. I've actually, it's been about 2 years now, and I haven't even tested a single time for it.
Yeah.
In terms of not like officially testing.
Yeah.
I know I've had it. I know, it started in March of 2020, and I think around August time I had it because, why else would I lose my taste for a week?
Right.
But that was about the extent of my symptoms. No fever, no aching, no anything. I just lost my sense of taste. So, and then mild. I think recently, around Christmas time, there's something going around. I could only assume it was Omicron or whatever the new variant is.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that I had that like everyone else, and that was pretty mild as well. So
at this point, it's like, and it's probably true for most Slavics in America, but if you're a Slavic in America and you go to a Slavic church, you've probably had all of them at this point.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it works. Well, as the cases drop all over the world, we're talking about how infection rate of this Omicron case is so quick. I guess it spreads really fast and the symptoms are mild, that it's been pretty much bringing us to a point where we have herd immunity without even vaccines. And I'll touch a bit on that towards the end. But according to BBC, the monarch is experiencing, the monarch being the Queen, experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, expects to continue light duties. She got tested positive for COVID, but she will continue to receive medical attention, will follow appropriate guidelines. According to BBC, her eldest son and heir to the throne, Prince of Wales, tested positive on 10th of February after meeting with his mother on 8th of February. She was the spreader. She'll be 96 in April, and apparently she's been on the throne for 70 years.
That's crazy.
That is. That's a long time. And she survived COVID.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I thought
even
she was
at that age.
She was in the super risk category, but if you're a queen...
Well, I mean, with this last variant, it's like getting a cold. But I guess even a cold at the age of 96 could be pretty threatening. So
yeah, it could be fatal.
Yeah.
Again, unless you're a queen. Moving into the COVID news, Stan, did you have to get vaccinated for work?
That was actually an interesting story. So when I just started with the company, they were saying whatever the state is requiring, that's what we're going to require. And so comes, late November, early December, we got an email saying you either have to be vaccinated or you have to get an exemption by, I think it was like January 4th for weekly testing. And so I know how a lot of people had it where, you ask for an exemption, you have to write a whole paper, why, your reasoning. So our company was actually really lenient with that. All I had to do was just check a box saying I want an exemption, and that's all they asked. And I know there's a lot of people, where they couldn't really get an exemption. I know they got vaccinated, and then a week after that, the Supreme Court shut it all down, and
yes.
And now we're not testing, and it's not required. So, yeah, that was interesting. But I know right now the state is ending its mask mandate. I'm waiting to hear from, I'm going to see what the company's going to say about that, because if I could stop wearing the mask at work, that would be pretty nice.
That would be cool. Well, the vaccine drives, according to Associated Press, is grinding to a halt, and apparently demand has all but collapsed in places, especially conservative places. The average number of Americans getting the first shot is down to about 90,000 a day, they say, and it's the lowest point since the first few days of U.S. vaccination campaigns in December 2020. Hopes of any substantial improvement in the immediate future have largely evaporated. Now, Karina mentioned yesterday, my wife Karina yesterday mentioned a unique comment. She was like, Bill Gates at one of the recent conferences mentioned, he was like, Omicron beat us essentially with the herd immunity, and we need to work faster next time with our vaccines, because by the time we were done with our vaccines, people already achieved immunity through Omicron. And I thought that was an ironic comment. It's like, hold on, so aren't you... Maybe we should have done it the other way around. Let people get herd immunity quickly through getting... I don't know. It's just one of those things.
Well, I remember there was a professor that early on in the whole coronavirus thing, he was telling... I think it was like to his students or something, or to his class, where he was like, just go out and get it because you're at no risk and you'll just be immune after that. And I know he had a lot of backlash for saying that, but I kind of agree with him.
Yeah, and you would expect they would bring it, say, into the family, maybe in a milder form at that point, right? Or because they've been sick, the next variation, there's probably some logic.
And I mean, if the younger people just got sick, I mean, if you were like 18 through 30 years old, I think that was the range, and the death rate was not even 0.1%. It was very, very little. Of all the U.S., I think there's about 2,000 deaths in that age range, and there's how many millions of people in that age range, and I'm assuming that most of those would probably come in some form of people who already had complications, and so if the healthy people did get sick, then they wouldn't have the chance of spreading it. But that's pretty controversial too, but food for thought.
Yep. And according to Fox News, like you mentioned earlier, CDC is going to loosen up its COVID-19 indoor mask guidance, including for schools. Now, this is, again, we're expecting it from the state, but we're talking now on a federal level as well. All right, moving on to economy. Do you already own a house?
Me? No.
No, you don't. You didn't get into it.
I wish, but it's here it's almost impossible.
Yeah, well, getting rent is probably... So you're getting married soon, right? And you're probably considering rent at some point, I assume, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you guys are going to be buying. But either way you put it, I got two articles in front of me here, one from Wall Street Journal and the other one from Associated Press. And one says home price growth hits record high in 2021, and the other one says rents reach insane levels in 2021.
And I see both of those. It's insane.
It is crazy. It's like, I understand a little bit of a jump, but we're talking about 20% in the 12 months, a jump in 20% in prices. At least that's according to, again, this is across the nation. Now, neighborhoods obviously jumped, depends where you live. But across the nation, a 20% rise, that's a lot. Here's a quote from Associated Press. In the 50 largest U.S. metro areas, median rent rose at an astounding 19.3% from December 2020 to December 2021, according to Realtor.com. And nowhere more was the jump bigger than in Miami metro area, where the median rent exploded to $2,800, which is 50% higher than previous year. So again, it depends on an area, right? But you have 20% rise in home prices and 20% rise in rent prices, which is, I guess, kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, no, it's crazy, because I'm looking around right now, and if you want something half decent, like even if you're looking at a duplex that's like 1,000 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, prices are almost at $2,000 per month, which, if you think about it, that's crazy. I mean, if you want just a decent house with your own garage and a couple bedrooms and a couple bathrooms, you're paying upwards no less than $2,500 per month.
And the sad part is you're entering a territory where you could be paying that for your house if you're in a good but that's, again, if you're in a good position for income wise. And this is where it's like, that's the balance. You have a lot of young people entering the market. Not everybody's got great jobs. Again, you went to school. Not everybody goes to school nowadays. Some people work, trade jobs, and it could be really tough to even become a home buyer. And it's sad, because it's going to keep him trapped in the system for many years. There is an estimated shortfall of 5.8 million single family homes. That's a 51% leap from the end of 2019. according to Associated Press. So we have this huge gap of homes that haven't been built because of, well, the pandemic and just in general shortage of homes for sale, slow down construction, the cost of materials went up and so on. So we're in for we're living in a unique time where it's just, I hope it's going to reshake soon. Stan, as we move on to the next subject, was there anything in your news feed this week besides Ukraine? Something that stood out to you that was, I guess, besides trucking?
There was the whole thing where, I think it was this week, where vaccines were approved for kids between ages 6 and 11, and that was February 11th, 2022.
Oh, okay. So basically, besides the old news, you haven't really seen anything besides Ukraine.
So yeah, besides the old news, there's nothing new, yeah.
And that's what I was driving at, is that, and again, one might say, well, you're an Ukrainian American, so of course you would have Ukraine in your news, but really it was not even so much it was like across the board, from American citizens to people, all over the world. Just Ukraine being in the headlines and in the prayers and minds of people. Why am I saying this? Is because according to Associated Press, this was an interesting, and of course they used it to push their own message there, but they said climate change gets pushed out of spotlight. And the article went on to say climate change is no longer at the top of the agenda of the world leaders and many executives, having been shoved aside due to Russian war in Ukraine, as well as COVID-19 and inflation. Now, they finished the article by saying, on the other hand, the Russian invasion of Ukraine could possibly spur Europe to speed up its efforts to become energy independent via renewables, which, again, that's a stretch, but I can totally see how this is causing an issue for Europe.
Yeah, I can't pull the numbers. I'm not sure what they are exactly, but I know a lot of gas and oils comes out of Russia to Europe.
Europe, and a lot of it runs through Ukraine. If you look at the map.
I don't know what the number is for that, but I know a lot of it is. But I believe Norway or Sweden, those countries, they have oil pumping as well up in, the Arctic Ocean or, up north over there.
Yeah. But it was interesting how, we had this climate push and everything, and then something as silly as a war could really upset the whole economy. And I mean, we're going to see prices rise here, like for gas.
Yeah.
We're going to see issues, reverberate across the world. And that includes oil as well, right?
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden...
Go ahead. I saw something funny where it was, someone blaming the whole war going on for gas prices rising, and then it was like someone posted, he was like, I took this picture back in December before the war, and gas was already $5 a gallon.
Yep. All right. So according to KUT, that's Austin's NPR station, Texas Attorney General declares gender-affirming medical care for transgender kids as child abuse. So Attorney General of Texas Ken Paxton had issued a legal opinion defining certain gender-affirming health care for transgender kids as child abuse. There is no doubt that these procedures are abuse under Texas law and thus must be halted, said the Republican. Or he wrote it in a statement announcing his legal interpretation this past Monday. Now, again, it's not legal binding decision. It's just an opinion that he, put forward. And it came in response to a request from a chairman of the Texas House of Representatives General Investigative Committee, Representative Matt Cross, Fort Worth. And it basically asserts that medical treatments such as hormone therapy and puberty blockers meet the state's legal standard of abuse for causing mental and emotional injury to a child that results in an observable and material impairment of the child's growth, development, or psychological functioning under Section 261.001 of Texas Family Code, in case you were taking notes. But basically, Texas is leading the way because this is a conversation. This is an ongoing discourse, I guess, across the nation, right? Texas does something, Florida does something, New York does something, California, and it all reverberates around all the states.
For kids to decide things like that, I mean, you wouldn't trust the child with just about anything else, like right. Any major thing. I mean, start trying to push for 5-year-olds to get driver's license and see what response you get. And recently I've been kind of doing some research and watching some videos about hormonal things and
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy to see the effect that, say, puberty and things like that have on even your mental state, like just your capacity to understand things and to grow and mature mentally. And so from the things that I've learned and from the things that I saw, I agree that it is child abuse. If you're changing those kind of biological things to someone who's pre-puberty, you're doing unknown damage to them for the rest of their lives. So I fully agree that it is child abuse, and we have to do everything in our power to protect and fight for that.
And hopefully this will be heard also. I mean, and again, because it's done on a national level, this is not just somebody, coming out on their podcast and, saying their opinion, even if it's a popular podcast or news station. But this is on a national level. And so that's really great to see that it's being defined as abuse. In the world of Christianity, Word for Word Bible movie now is available in 1,000 languages. That's according to Christian Headlines. Now, before we get into what it's all about, have you watched the Chosen series?
No, sadly not. I've been intending to start, and
really?
I will watch it all. But I think I'll just save that for when I'm married and do that together.
Have a binge movie week. Okay.
Yeah, because got a lot on my plate. So.
Well, don't feel too bad, because I intended to watch it as well, and I only watched 2 series of the first season. So
okay,
and
so I'm not too far behind.
Yep, not really.
But I've only heard good reviews about it.
It's great.
I'm really looking forward to watching it. So.
From what I've seen, it's great. My wife watched it. I think all at this point. So yeah. Anyway, so for this is essentially a groundbreaking Bible movie that includes an unabridged text of scripture for the script. Is now available in more than 1,000 languages. They're titled simply as the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I think I had a chance to watch Matthew with the kids, and it's really interesting because it is word for word.
So it's like a 4-part series?
No, it's 4 different movies.
Oh,
but as it unfolds, you got Matthew like sitting down and writing kind of, or like in one, he has a scribe, but like he tells the kids, let me tell you, like the generations he lists. Okay. But it's gotcha. In a narrative form.
Okay, so that's interesting.
They were released in English beginning 2014, then translated into other languages. And basically at this point, they reached 1,000th language translation with the language of Sengwa or Senga, which is spoken by the people in Zambia and other locations. They're available on Prime Video's IMDb TV channel with ads. But I think that's pretty cool. 1,000 languages. Talk about spreading the gospel to the lands of the earth. Then moving on to the next one. Have you tried octopus?
Yes, I actually have.
What did you think?
I mean, a little bit chewy, but it's edible.
Yeah, I felt like it was just a cool thing to try, but...
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
It's not something you're like, oh man, I crave octopus. But apparently,
and I mean, they have some interesting. I've seen there's like this video where it's like an octopus on this, and it's like a full octopus. It's obviously dead, and it's like on top of this food thing. And when they pour the salty like soy sauce over it, like the chemical reaction makes the octopus move as if it's alive. Super weird, but
okay. Yeah. If you wanted to eat something that was still alive, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, the Spanish company is pouring tens of millions of dollars in becoming the world's first commercial octopus farm, in spite of mounting evidence that creatures can feel pain and pleasure. Never mind the environmental impact of cephalopod farming, and that's according to Futurism. Now, Reuters reported that a company is set to start farming octopi pending European Union approval, and that they already have 65 million euros, equivalent of $74 million invested into the startup fishery efforts. Now, people are freaking out about it, but I don't see how that's different than, I don't know, having a fish farm or crab farm, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's food.
I mean, I know octopus they're pretty intelligent,
mm-hmm.
but I guess, it's not I wouldn't say it's any difference.
I thought most animals are off limits. Or, I mean, most animals are okay to eat. I mean, some we just feel like they're, I don't know, it's just a weird thing. We eat animals. That's what we do.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's people that like eat horse and stuff, but that's illegal.
Is
And
it?
that's just, I mean, yeah.
At least in US, probably.
In the US, it's illegal.
Yeah.
I know, I don't know if it's, I think there was, I know recently within the last decade, there was some controversy about it. I think in like Canada or something, but I know in the US it's illegal. I mean, I can't imagine that it's legal to like breed dogs for food either. So,
Right. Yep.
you know,
Yep.
so,
Or cats.
you know,
For
there's
that
a
matter.
limit. I don't know who makes that limit.
I mean, it is probably good.
'Cause because I know when I was in Myanmar in 2018, so one of the locals that was living with us, he was from like a northern province of that country, and he said that they eat dog. Like he was like, yeah, if you're ever here and we go to where I'm from, my dad will cook us some dog, and to them it's perfectly normal.
Yeah. Yeah. It really depends on the cultural, I guess. My dad did eat horse. I think that's when he was in Afghanistan early on, or maybe in his village. I don't really remember, but he did tell me a story of eating horse, and he's like, "It's good meat." Okay.
Yeah.
So moving on to the last two stories, and hopefully we'll be able to cover them. Have you gotten into NFTs and like the crypto art? I'm intending
No,
to research
I'm
that
not,
stuff.
I'm not part of that investing world. Not yet, at least.
Not yet. Whenever you get to it, if you're interested, I'm interested. I need a buddy to dive into that world with, because otherwise it just kind of goes on a back burner.
Yeah.
But apparently, a hacker or hackers are actively stealing and flipping high-valued NFTs from users on OpenSea, the world's largest NFT exchange, causing chaos and confusion in the broader NFT community, according to Vice. The current mechanism, they say, for the hack is unknown, but they placed a red banner at the top of the site saying that they're actively investigating. And this is interesting because, NFTs are supposed to be super secure, and you're the only one who owns the unique string, the hash behind, or the what is it called, blockchain behind your piece of art. And so to see it being, again, I don't think this is a blockchain issue. This is more probably a OpenSea issue, like the NFT exchange issue. And then the last thing I was going to mention, and this will be the last story for today, and that is that Trump's Truth social media debuts in Apple's App Store, and it hits #1 in top charts. Some people who downloaded the social media app receive error messages when they try to create an account. Others were placed on waitlist, according to CNET.com. So one thing I can tell you about this is that we will have an account as soon as we are approved. And that is all for today's Lightning Round stories.
I think that most of us have heard or come across the Freedom Convoy that was happening in Canada, and so it seems like this week it's finally come to an end, and it's just crazy to see how that happened over the course of the past month. I remember seeing from the first few days, there was some videos that came out, and there was an interview with one of the truckers, and he was saying, I have supplies for 2 weeks, and I was like thinking, dang, 2 weeks? This guy's willing to stay in his truck for 2 weeks. But 1 week passed, 2 weeks passed, 3 weeks passed, almost a full month passed. And I know Alex and Vadim talked about the story a little bit last week, and it was mentioned when the whole thing just started, but it seems to have come to an end. From what I was able to find, it's very hard to see any kind of pictures or find real time information on this thing. I know they cleared the bridge that connects with Michigan, and supposedly the truckers moved out of neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods. How much of them are left in the actual downtown area, I'm not exactly sure, but it seems like majority of the truckers have left. I'm guessing this is due to the Emergencies Act that was put in place last week. Seemed to have quite a big effect. Some 200 bank accounts were frozen, and assets were seized certain truckers who were in the area. And so, from the perspective of the truckers, it's crazy how long they were there. But when they got cracked down on like that, where it was their finances, and I know there's truckers there with kids with them, and so that was kind of a huge argument too. With they were saying they were going to start taking kids away and things like that. So when it comes to that, then I guess a lot of the truckers really started thinking whether it's worth staying. And I know over 100 people were arrested. I know the main organizers and leaders were arrested. Lots of trucks were towed and vehicles. I think over 3,000 tickets were handed out. So it's just crazy to see just when they were given that kind of emergency power. It was insane, how they were able to just crack down
and like you said earlier, the fact that there's not a ton of pictures or coverage of it, or not. I've heard that some, I guess, liberty organizations were trying to get to raise concern about the way these truckers were treated as they were arrested and stuff like that. But besides that, there's not a lot of attention on them because I think they've achieved their message, if you will, right? Initially, there was people sort of were dismissing it in the media world, and there wasn't a lot of media coverage. But then as it went into week 2 and onwards, it became impossible to ignore. And so the cameras were there, the reporters were sent there, everybody was like, all right, flying to Canada to cover the story. It's the major thing right now. And now it just seems like, it kind of fell out of the spotlight except on the local stations. But you mentioned the fact of, or you mentioned the idea of how much emergency powers can do. And I struggled with that even last time. Where do you find the balance between a protest and a disrupting protest, right? How far do you go to protest? And again, they might say, well, we have a good reason for it, because how far does the government get to go, before our lives are being squeezed out? So there's just this balance that I don't know where to find the good line.
Yeah, so I kind of was reading up on that, So we saw how the so-called protests were happening the last couple of years, and it's very hard to call them protests. Those were full-on riots and
right.
Buildings, businesses destroyed. And, it seems like even for that, there was not as much repercussion. No one ever at any point, tried to introduce any kind of Emergencies Act for that or tried to do anything for that. And the way even police responded, they were there in their gear and they were just holding the line. They weren't really, oftentimes you could see that they were holding back because, if they do step forward, there's going to be repercussions. There's going to be, I don't know what coming their way, Molotov cocktails and who knows what. But, this is that Freedom Convoy. Although, you can't say that they didn't cause a disruption. They were honking their horns and they're taking over the downtown of the capital. But that was truly a peaceful protest. There was nothing destroyed. There was nothing. The police weren't getting attacked. There was no deaths. There was nothing like that. And even seeing how the police reacted, how there was, police that would harass those, because they knew that they weren't going to get any repercussion for that. Not only because of the Emergencies Act, but because these were truly peaceful protesters and they weren't going to, retaliate in the same way that maybe the so-called protesters of the last few years that we've seen would have. And so, I've also heard that a lot of people are saying, well, how the right side and conservatives, how they have a double standard. At one point they're saying, oh, back but the blue, and now they're saying, the police are in the wrong. But, it's not that, we were saying back the blue and then police are wrong. It's just we see how the different forms are taking place. Those protesters, they're not putting in danger the livelihood of those police officers. They're not attacking them. So, there's just a fine line to draw between, what a protest is in the first place and what exactly they're standing and representing and how the different sides are getting treated.
So I guess, the big question is at which point the cause is greater than the losses inflicted by the protest or the temporary discomfort for the community.
That's kind of what it is, there was no loss with this Freedom Convoy. There really wasn't. There was no destruction. I mean, I guess they did cause
like the business in downtown.
Yeah, the business is not only in downtown, but they blocked the bridge over to Michigan, which I read a thing where 25% of the trucking between U.S. and Canada happens right there. So,
and as a result, there wasn't really much changes in COVID restrictions. And like we mentioned in the lightning round, as now CDC is dropping its guidelines. Right now, we're going to see the loosening of all these mask mandates and vaccine push and all of that. Sadly, it wasn't as a response to but then you kind of wonder, right? I bet number one, it wasn't in response to the truckers, Freedom Convoy, directly, obviously. But is it because there's a mounting pressure to be done with all this garbage? Probably.
Yeah, that's actually one thing I was discussing with one of my friends. How fast everything is happening. Things are starting to get dropped. It makes me feel suspicious. What's kind of the game plan for them? Why exactly are they doing that? It seemed like they're pushing so hard, and now the whole story that we're hearing is completely the opposite of what they've kind of been preaching the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it raised my eyebrow.
Yep,
that's for sure. I don't know if they're preparing for midterms. I don't know if they have some kind of a game plan behind it, or if it's just the rising pressures. So I'm not exactly sure how much the Freedom Convoy actually did in terms of ending any kind of mandates or getting their message across to actually make a change. It seems like a lot of what they were doing and did was just kind of dismissed by their government, as we saw with the Emergencies Act. They just wanted them out. Although I believe it was in the first weeks, their Prime Minister Trudeau was saying "Oh, we hear your message, just go home," and just the way he was saying, it sounded like, okay, cool, get out of here. He didn't actually want to do anything about it, and the way they ended it just forcefully like that, without coming to a resolution, it's hard to see what was truly done. But one thing we do know is, they definitely inspired a lot of people around the world, and now we're seeing how there's a convoy forming here in the U.S. and they're heading towards Washington, D.C. I think they're at New Mexico already. Again, it's very hard to kind of find information on that in terms of how much trucks there are. I know they have almost $1 million in donations already, so I mean, people are definitely supporting it and seeing what they're standing for.
Do you think it's going to be more lenient here than it is in Canada? Because Canada does tend to be a little more dictatorial.
I think it probably will be a little more lenient here, just because I think they will face a much bigger backlash if they do something forcefully. But what we're seeing right now is, they're supposedly trucking for, against the mandates and everything, but we're seeing a lot of these things already coming to an end and kind of concluding. So I guess from here we just watch and see what happens.
Well, that's all for the stories for this week. We are so glad you've joined us for another episode of LifeRing. Please consider following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. Just type in LifeRing Podcast. Also consider sharing it with a friend or a family member that would benefit from a weekly overview of the current events from a conservative and Christian perspective. And as always, we would like to remind you that there is no better news on any given day than the good news of Jesus Christ. He died for the sins of the world so that everyone who comes to him would be saved. We encourage you to seek him if you haven't already. Thank you for listening to LifeRing, and we'll see you next week.